Welcome to Gone to Texas, a podcast about AMC's Preacher. My name is Alex, and I have not read any of Garth Ennis's Preacher.
And I'm Nick, and I have read all of Garth Ennis's Preacher.
Today, we will be discussing episode 2 of the show, titled See, that's S-E-E. While we will not be spoiling any of the comic, and by extension, any future plot lines of the show, we will be discussing the details of the series through episode 2, so pause this and go watch the show before you listen to the rest of the episode. You can find more episodes of our podcast at g2tpodcast.com. That's the letter G, the number 2, and the letter T, podcast.com. We're also G2T Podcast on Twitter, and you can send feedback to g2tpodcast at gmail.com to tell us what you think of our show and share your thoughts on AMC's Preacher so we can read them on air. Send us corrections, observations, anything regarding Preacher or our podcast. I did actually get G2T Podcast at Gmail because it was stupid that 2 of them were G2T Podcast and 1 of them was G2T Feedback. So, good foresight on my behalf.
Got to streamline it where you can.
Yep. So we can get right into it here. This episode opens, I think they traditionally call this the teaser. At least that's what the Breaking Bad crew would call it. But it's kind of the cold open of the show. We've got a man in 1881 going on a journey to get medicine for his sick daughter. There's kind of a family that he has dinner with, and they're kind of talking about how they're foraging into paradise, and he asks if this mysterious shadowy figure thinks it's paradise, and he just says, it ain't. So, we don't know who this guy is. I don't know who this guy is, but Nick knows this man.
I do.
Yeah.
I know him very well.
So, I don't necessarily want to talk too much. You're happy with the casting?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's if anyone has listened to any of the film nerds, there have been, I think, multiple episodes where we've heaped praise on Graham McTavish.
Yes.
And I really like Graham McTavish, which is funny because I always think he's in Dog Soldiers, but he's not. But he's so good in Rambo that like I think that's where my love of him initially stemmed. I was like, who is this guy? Yeah. He's just excellent. He's popped up in a whole ton of stuff.
But you like him for who you know he's playing.
In regards to this show? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a lot of the cast, it kind of extends to the overall casting of the show. I think there's a lot of kind of not off the wall, but just interesting casting. There's nothing too crazy yet where I'm just like, what? I don't even know what to think. For the most part, it's either dead on or it's interesting. Mm-hmm. He's interesting. Okay. I think he's very capable, but I'm curious with what direction the character is going to go in, as I am with pretty much all the characters. And I saw some people online are somewhat surprised that this character has been introduced this early. Are you surprised as well? No. No? Okay. Good to know. We'll check in more on him later at some point in the series, because that's kind of all we get in this episode, as far as I know. We can break into Act 1 now. We've got Jessie still not helping Tulip with her job, which is kind of a recurring theme throughout these 2 episodes. Cassidy is doing odd jobs around the church and wants to kind of get paid for it or something. He also meets Arseface for the first time. Mm-hmm. Gets a pretty good reaction out of him. And so anything in there that you want to talk about? We talked a little bit earlier about Jessie and Tulip and how that might get tired pretty quickly. Yeah, I think that's that is a good thing to talk about, because without obviously we got to kind of be careful what we say, because we don't want to ruin anything for anybody who plans on reading or hasn't read. But Tulip is very different in the show than she is in the book. She's the most different character so far, I would say. Mm-hmm. With, on the other side of the coin, Cassidy being the most accurate character so far, which is really cool, because the book is, it's a huge story and there's a lot of characters, but it's essentially at its core largely about the relationship between Jessie, Cassidy, and Tulip. So it's cool that Jesse's kind of in the middle. He's not too different or too similar, but Cassidy is like perfect adaptation and Tulip is a reimagining. Yeah. So it's kind of neat that this is all swirling around and that the chemistry is all still kind of sorting itself out. It's cool. But I do agree that is getting a little exhausting. Because it's kind of at the point where by the end of this episode, I was kind of like, okay, like he doesn't want to do it. Like,
Yeah.
leave him alone.
Yeah, we're not even really seeing Jesse waver on it at all.
No,
so
and-
it's kind of getting. It feels like she's hitting a brick wall,
And
like,
she's also not elaborating whatsoever on what it is.
yeah.
There's a slight.
You get a little bit more later in the episode
Yeah.
about it's for somebody named Danny.
But it's not enough to
And-
make me even intrigued as to what it is.
Okay.
So it is wearing a little bit thin. I'm hoping by episode 3 they've kind of cracked into what this thing is and why she needs Jesse so much.
Okay, yeah, we'll see. And then other things that happened in the first act. First time we really see Jesse get angry at a man who's confessing to his pedophile-like thoughts. I think that's kind of what the show. I was a little confused the first time I watched it of like what the filmmaking was trying to tell us about. Jesse kind of tunes out of the conversation a little bit, but I think upon second viewing, it seems like he's kind of growing enraged with the fact that this man could be so vile.
Yeah. Yeah, the show so far is definitely...
You said last episode that Jesse seems lighter in tone.
He does. Well, where we meet Jesse in the show is he's pretty different than where we meet him in the books.
Yeah.
I think in the books he's more further down the path.
He's been there for a while.
Yes.
People
and
around him are terrible.
Yeah, exactly. The book and the movie, or I mean the show so far, it hasn't really strayed from that idea that in general there are good people, but most of them are loathsome and have these dark, awful secrets that they say they want to get better about and they want to repent for and they want to be forgiven for, but do they really? Is kind of this theme.
Yeah.
So, and it even is mentioned in dialogue in that scene where the guy's like, I mean, I'm good, right? I'm absolved.
Yeah, he's
And
like,
Jesse's
I've confessed.
and Jesse says, you really have to mean it though. Like, you have to want it. So this is something that I think is also kind of dabbled in like Daredevil, for example. Not to such a degree, but in a way. That's one of those things where in those stories, Daredevil is constantly struggling with whether his actions are right or wrong.
Yeah.
He thinks although does the end justify the means, and he frequently is like repenting for what he's done, but is he really sorry?
Yeah.
'Cause he kind of loves it. So that's that's kind of I like that the show is not straying whatsoever from anything religious, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
Like, there's a fight scene in a church in this episode that we'll talk a little bit more about. But I in the first episode I wasn't as sold with Jesse, but I kind of like taking this part of the journey with him as a viewer. I think it's kind of interesting watching where I think he'll wind up. I could be wrong, so we'll see.
Yeah. And then finally at the end of Act 2, or at the end of Act 1, we see Jesse quiet a dog with his powers. So that's another interesting wrinkle in that he can
Maybe that's why he tunes out. He's just like, God, that dog is annoying.
yeah, because you hear the dog at the time. You're kind of like, God, like, does he have super hearing too? Like,
I mean, it could be. I think Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg are pretty clever, and I think maybe they're drawing this. I think they're working on a lot of levels that I haven't begun to peel away yet, and I think that maybe there's even drawing a comparison between what this guy is saying and this dog barking, and it's just white noise. It's just loud sound.
Yeah,
it doesn't have any real meaning to it.
Yeah. All right, so that's the end of Act 1. Act 2, we open with a Quincannon meat and packing truck on the highway. We meet Odin Quincannon for the first time. Played by Jackie Earle Haley, which is awesome.
Very good.
We kind of see their operation and that they're kind of ousting local cattle farmers from their land for something. We don't really know what quite yet. So I think, remarked last episode that you felt, or no, I think it was while we were watching the pilot, you felt as though Quincannon, that might be appearing a little bit earlier than...
That's way early.
Yeah,
that was near the tail end of the series. It's cool though. I think it seemed to me like they were pretty much just buying out like poor farmers, and just basically starting to monopolize the meat industry in the town. But Jackie Earle Haley is really good casting.
Yeah,
he's always turns in just like really great performances. He's always a treat.
Very happy to see him in the show.
Yeah.
We get a little bit more of Tulip goading Jesse into trying to help her, which we've already spoken about, and then we get a pretty solid conversation between Jesse and Cassidy about God's plan and kind of their own personalities and their differences. Basically, the main thing, Jesse says, boring's not the worst thing a person could be, and Jesse says, I think you're wrong, boring's the worst. And then Cassidy, excuse me, and they both kind of laugh about it.
Yeah, that scene was interesting because it has moments of real chemistry and camaraderie between those two, and there were some just angles of that scene where like the line deliveries didn't feel as natural. It was really interesting. It definitely felt like a lot of several takes cut together, and it felt like there were some moments where they really nailed it. The relationship and the friendship between those two is really interesting in the comic, and it's frequently like really funny. Like frequently in the book, Tulip is always just like nauseated by Cassidy, and she's like, "Why do you hang around this guy?" Because Jesse is, in general, despite whatever bad things he may do, he's a really good person at heart, and that never wavers in the book. Like everyone always knows, like he's a good guy, even though he does like really some pretty, awful stuff.
Yeah,
maybe not awful, but questionable. And
like
Cassidy,
breaking a man's arm. In
yeah,
season
exactly.
1.
And then not really feeling too bad about it. And so everyone kind of recognizes that, and so there's a lot of these times where they're kind of like, "What are you doing with this guy?" Because Cassidy's clearly so like.
It seems like the organist is kind of playing that a little bit more. Because she's a little more involved with the
That's
church,
true.
and Cassidy's around there. She's kind of filling in that role a little bit. I think her name is Emily. Now that I've actually looked
I feel
it
bad
up.
that I don't know her name because she's I actually like her. She's a good character.
Yeah, so I think she's kind of filling that.
And like
role
I said,
a little
Tulip
bit.
is so different. Like Tulip
Yeah.
in the book is much more of a straight arrow with like kind of a. She's kind of almost like Karen, again, not to talk about Daredevil all the time, but she's kind of like Karen in Daredevil, where she's like good, but there are hints of something in her background that are a little bit off. But anyway,
But she can take care of herself.
I did forget to
kind of
mention, I did like in the baptism moment at the opening of the episode when he dunks Tulip. I really liked when she like just gives flashes in that big smile in the water. And again, it's just that presence that the actress has. She's just very interesting and makes these weird choices. And I'm just kind of like, huh, that's cool. I like that.
She's definitely got some character to her. It might not be Tulip, but
yeah, that's true.
So, all right.
But that was a good scene between those two.
Yeah, absolutely. I like getting a little bit more about Cassidy. You get Cassidy bearing all to Jesse, kind of being like, "I'm a 119-year-old vampire," like that. He told him straight up, "This is what I am," and because he knew Jesse would laugh it off, but. So that's kind of interesting.
Oh man, I just can't wait to watch the evolution of Cassidy. It's gonna be he's so good. That casting is so good.
Yeah,
casting.
So basically, Jesse takes a drink out of this weird concoction that Cassidy has made. He passes out. Cassidy takes his keys and wallet to go and get some alcohol, presumably, and then we see the strange men from last episode where it ended. They're in a hotel room with a huge case that's got something in it, and they seem to be heading out. So that's where Act 3 ends, or Act 2 ends. Act 3 opens on this weird animation of something inside of Jesse's body, and then pulls out to see the strange men standing over his passed out body, and they seem to be performing some kind of extraction ritual. And apparently, like the thing that he's singing, one of the men is singing, is Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod, some kind of poem from the 1800s.
Yeah, it's like a nursery rhyme.
Yeah. So I expect you know more about this than I thought you did, because I didn't think you would know. I don't know what context this comes in the comics. So try to dance around that a little bit, but. I was really off put by him starting to sing in the middle of the show. Did that?
That doesn't really happen.
Okay.
In the book, no.
But you took it better than I did, because I remember looking over at you when you were watching it, and I was like, he's not fazed by this at all.
I mean, it's Preacher. Like, there's a lot of there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be like, what the hell?
Yeah.
It didn't. No, it is weird, and I figured out who those two characters are, and the one of them is perfectly cast, and the other one I'm still not sure about.
Chainsaw guy.
The one that was singing,
cast.
I'm kind of like trying to figure him out still.
Okay.
But no, that was a strange scene, and I was kind of like, what is? I mean, in my mind, I was kind of like, what's going on with a little old like. It's almost like almost like a player piano. The way the music was playing, yeah, that was cool. And the coffee can, like it was very,
on Jesse's stomach. It's very much like, what in the hell are they doing?
It is interesting.
So, basically, they get.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. First of all, they go to chop it out of him with the chainsaw, and then Cassidy walks in, presumably after his beer run, and starts. He assumes that these guys are some more of the vampire hunters coming after him. What do you think of this fight scene? compared to some of last
I thought it was okay.
episode. Yeah,
It was okay. I liked that it was in a church and that they were like hitting each other with pews and like or like ramming each other's faces into pews and like hymnals and stuff like that.
It felt a lot more sloppy to me. It felt more like a Jason Bourne than like a James Bond.
Yeah,
to the last episode.
Part of that was probably just maybe that was by design, kind of the chaos of the moment and like people slipping on blood and like awkwardly running around with the chainsaw. It was kind of fun, but I didn't feel as captivated as I was in the first season. Or in the first episode. We're gonna do that a lot, aren't we?
Yeah.
In the first episode, the fight on the plane was so good. Like I really liked that. It was well shot, and I thought it was well choreographed, and it was fun and interesting. And this one was definitely interesting, but I was kind of like, well, it didn't quite live up to the first episode, but that's cool.
Yeah,
it was still fun. Like it was. I'm watching these guys beat the shit out of each other in a church, and I was like, man, it's a vampire fighting these guys with chainsaws and hitting them in the face with books. And
it's not straying away from the sacrilege. That's for sure. We open up on the Toadvine whorehouse. Some kind of Quincannon. It looks like the Quincannon guys hang out there a fair amount. Tulip's there playing poker with a group of them. And we learn a little bit more about her Uncle Walter, who we kind of briefly passed out in the first episode. And she's also, we get a little bit more about, that's where we first learn about somebody named Danny who wants the map that she retrieved, our client of Danny. So a little bit more on Tulip there. Anything there that kind of stuck out? I don't really know that there was too much to chew on.
No, not really. I think the other thing that Tulip is a little bit, I mean, her relationship with Jesse and like what she wants him for, like we said, is getting a little bit worn out. But I think they've established by now that she's not your average girl.
Yeah.
She's kind of a tough girl who grew up on the wrong side of the tracks maybe, and she's clearly, belongs to a different sort of lifestyle than Jesse currently wants for himself. Mm-hmm. I think they've made it clear enough by now. Like I don't need to see her running a table in poker or anything like that. Like in the next episode, I think we're going to see her like in a knife fight, like in a basement or something, and then
she's got her hand tied to the other guy.
She's playing Russian roulette. Like it's just going to be. It's kind of at the point where I'm like, okay, like we got it. Let's move, because she's really interesting and the actress is really good, and I want to see them go a little bit more with her.
She needs more forward momentum.
Yeah, and it's only episode 2, so it's fine. We've fleshed out Cassidy and Jesse pretty well now. I think it's time to get a little bit more out of her.
Yep.
Than just angrily driving away.
Yeah. We cut back to Cassidy drinking some blood off of the floor, and he heals up. And then I forgot to mention earlier in the episode that Jesse told him that they need to be on the level. Things need to be good. Cassidy needs to behave.
No trouble.
No trouble is what he says. So Cassidy goes to kind of clean up after the melee in the church. Before realizing that the sun is up and he can't go and bury the bodies. So that's the end of Act 3. Act 4 here, Emily, the organist, finds Jesse on the floor of the church, wakes him up to go spend some time with the Loach family, who we find out their daughter is in a coma after some kind of massive head trauma. And while Jesse's giving some faithful words to the mother, she just kind of falls on her deaf ears, because she's just kind of like, that's all well and good, but I still have to deal with this. I thought it was pretty good. It seems like it seems like it's a demonstration of Jesse kind of learning that regardless of how, he seems like he's gotten to be a better preacher. There's a bigger turnout at the church. People are coming to get baptized. That's kind of a big step earlier in the episode, compared to where we see him in the last episode getting cut off by Emily because his sermon's going too long and that kind of thing. So it seems like he's kind of learning that people need more than just the good faith. I don't know exactly what to make of it yet. I'll come back to this a little bit later on.
Okay.
So let's do that. We get more of Tulip trying to convince Jesse to join her for the job. Mentions it's for somebody named Danny. That's all of Act 4. So we got that point. And then finally, and that was Tulip basically like tases Jesse on the road in the middle of the night and abducts him to a room. Seems like it's a pretty insane thing to do, but Jesse just sloughs it off as soon as she pops her head into the little window with a mask on. It's like he knows her shit.
That's true.
Yeah. So that's kind of it. We're still learning things about Tulip through this. We're learning things about Tulip and Jesse, really.
Yeah.
But it seems like they're treading water a little bit, trying to hold it back for later. So we open up on Act 5 with Jesse trying to saw the shackle off of his leg. And it seems like Arseface has walked into his house and kind of tells him that he isn't feeling any different after his baptism. And that seems to strike a chord with Jesse, in that it makes him understand that people won't change without an outside force. That's kind of what it rang to me, because he immediately steps to go to the pedophile's house and do something about that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get anything else out of that? Like, is it?
I think it also kind of ties in with the mother of the daughter who's in the coma.
Yeah.
Because Arseface, I really like Arseface in the show.
Yeah.
Actually, it was just funny because I think I just got done in our teaser, even when we first talked about the trailer, saying how I really didn't like Arseface in the comic. He's really endearing in the show, and they did a great job casting this kid who's just kind of like this. You just feel bad for him. He's kind of pitiful, and even though you do find out why he is the way he is in this episode, and it's really throwaway, like the moment.
Yeah.
But it kind of is in the book too, and it's just like that's what happened, and there you go. And so you think, oh, that's a pretty bad, stupid thing to do, but you still just kind of pity him. And I think that was an excellent job. But I think Jesse's kind of also, I do agree with what you said, but I think he's also kind of starting to realize how his job in many ways is almost kind of futile.
Yeah.
Like the best he can do is exactly what he's telling people to do, to just hang in there. And so I think he's almost kind of sick of hearing his own shit in a way. Like you can't just hang in there and wait for it to happen, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's good. I think his one-on-one scenes with Arseface have been really good, which is a sentence I didn't think I'd be saying.
Arseface is this really, like, he's kind of the tender emotional center of the show.
Yeah,
somehow.
Which is ridiculous.
But it's awesome. I think
it is.
It's
really
job.
good. I think they've made a character that's pretty one note and kind of stupid in the book into something three-dimensional and really good.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to seeing where else they go with him.
So something we didn't mention earlier on is that Jesse keeps seeing the bus driver driving around town, and it kind of fills him with that rage that we spoke about earlier as well. So after this conversation with Eugene, or Arseface, he decides to go to the pedophile's house and shock him into changing, or to stop his urges. And it ends up that he uses his power to make this man forget the girl at the back of the bus. And it seems in this scene that he realizes he has this power for the first time. He gets kind of thrown back from baptizing the guy and telling him to forget her. And he fully realizes, whoa, that was more than just me now. How did you like that moment?
Well, it's really interesting because in the first episode, I mean, he plainly has like some crazy encounter with something, and he's out for like 3 days, and we haven't seen him like stop to like really think about that at all. So we haven't, or even like say anything to anybody. That's not that he's particularly close with anyone either at this point.
He asked Emily a few questions when he woke up, but that's really all.
So he seems to have almost just chalked it up to just a bad night of heavy drinking or something. But I thought that was kind of strange. He seems like a pretty level-headed guy, so you would think he would know when he's hit his limit of alcohol. But
they also like quietly remark about the man opening his heart as well in the beginning of this episode, and it seems like Jesse didn't really draw the connection between that interaction, maybe because it happened a couple states over or something like that.
True. Yeah, I'm glad that we're at that point now where he realizes that something is up, and I'm waiting for in the next episode, hopefully, for him to be like, "Whoa, maybe it was that something happened that night."
Okay, so after that, Cassidy buries the strange men in their own trunk without telling Jesse about it. But then we also see the sheriff talking to those same men again. Mm-hmm. So what the hell? But I assume we'll learn more soon.
Hope so.
You're sick of not talking about it, kind of.
Yeah. Like I was even just saying when we weren't recording yet, we were just talking, and I said that the comic moves at such a brisk pace. Like when it starts, it just goes.
Yep.
And that's so refreshing. It's really fun to read, and just you're constantly moving along, especially in the first few issues. You get to know all these people really quickly, and the story, a combination of the storytelling and the art. I mean, it lets you know a lot about who these people are in a very short amount of time. But we're probably like 3-4 issues in, you're like, okay, I got it. Not even that long. The first issue establishes them all pretty well. So the show, it's moving at a respectable pace, I guess. But there are certain things where I'm kind of like, okay, move a little more in this direction.
Yeah,
accelerate things a little bit. But this episode, I did actually really feel the difference between the pilot and this episode. That extra half hour really makes a big difference.
Yeah,
this one felt really brief.
Yeah, it did. It absolutely
which
did.
Makes me more concerned, even more so. I'm like, okay, we got to hit the gas because we're 2 out of 10 episodes down.
Yeah,
we've got a lot to do.
Yeah. So. And then after that, we've got Jesse heading back to the girl that's in a coma to attempt to use his powers to force her to open her eyes. And then the episode cuts to black. So he realizes he's got a power. He's going to try and use it. He's starting to maybe try and play around with it and figure out what he can do with it. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting, and we will hopefully see more on that again soon. So one other thing I wanted to say that you touched on, we did learn one of our questions from the end of last podcast episode was answered. Arseface tried to kill himself with a shotgun. That's why he is the way that he is. So one of those questions is already out of the way. But there's still a few more. We can go back. I'm going to make a blog entry on our page that has all the questions, and we'll track when they get answered and when they get asked.
Cool.
So I think that'll be good. So more on that next episode. What did you think of this episode overall?
I liked it. I think it's another good episode. I don't know if I liked it necessarily better than the first one.
Yeah.
They both have their strengths. I think the first one had more standout scenes. It was very interesting at times, and this one just kind of feels like it's moving us along to the next thing. It's a little bit more character here and there, and there are a couple moments I like. I really loved Cassidy like sitting down on the trunk and just watching the sun from like the safety of inside the church. There was a sadness to that moment.
Absolutely,
where
he's disappointed, kind of, and
he's obviously he's bummed out that he didn't get out there sooner to bury them. But I think that watching a beautiful sunrise and not being able to participate in it in any way is something that's a little sad, especially when we did get a definitive. He said it, but spoilers, I guess. Cassidy is a 119-year-old vampire. That is true, and. So thinking about all the ramifications that come with immortality, and there's a lot of real heavy ones. So I like that we kind of had that kind of quiet moment with just him. We've gotten some really interesting like one-on-one moments with Cassidy as the viewer.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
He feels like there are mysteries with Tulip and there are mysteries with Jesse, but Cassidy's the one who seems like he's kind of above all the other characters in that he's withholding this remarkable thing that he is, and he also just isn't particularly invested in a lot. So you get that feel that he's a guy who's used to drifting, and the fact that he feels this bond with Jesse is really cool.
Yeah,
and he to continually look out for him and stick his neck out, and because I was kind of thinking more along the lines of Cassidy. Sometimes the way he is in the books, and when he took his keys and wallet and stuff, I was like, oh shit, he's leaving, he's bailing. That's what I thought initially. He was just taking his truck and getting the hell out of Dodge, and then he was going to turn around and come back for some reason, but I was like, oh no, he just went to get more hooch. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Also in line with his character.
I liked the second episode, I think, more than the first, just because I feel as though I can feel that the show start to get its own footing.
Yeah.
I feel it finding its own voice and inching towards something different and new. And that's awesome. That's always a good thing. And sometimes it takes shows a whole season to really get to that point. And I feel like the fact that it's starting to move there in episode 2 is a good sign.
That's true.
But I
really liked the opening. Was really cool. Obviously, just really different. I like that for someone who's not informed, it's like, what the hell is this? And what does it have to do with anything?
Yeah.
It's cool. I really missed the 90 minutes, though. I felt brief to me. And I kind of was like, I want a little bit more. Because I'm thinking about the first episode, and I almost liked it better by default just because there was more.
Yeah.
Like, it was really... It was
He had more
essentially
to
it was
chew
almost a
on.
movie.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
So I really like that.
it was almost as long as Jonah Hex.
It's true. Actually, Jonah Hex is 83 minutes, I think. So
I
maybe
think
it's technically longer.
Yeah, well, I think it was. If with including commercials, it was longer.
I guess so.
But without commercials, it was not. So
Not quite to Jonah Hex.
yeah,
Yeah, I think this was a good episode. I'm really just antsy. I really do like it. I like how offbeat it is. I like how they're not shying away from being offensive, really,
Yeah.
in some regards. And this is still pretty light compared to where it could go and should go.
yeah.
The only real disappointment I still have with the show, and I know I said this during the show, and you were kind of like, you had this like kind of get over it tone to your voice, but I really don't like how Jesse's power is displayed.
Yeah.
I think it's cool that they do like the kind of close up and they've modulated his voice a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I think I mentioned it in episode 1, and if I did, sorry, but this will be the last time I really talk about it. But the cue in the books is like the font is a little bit different, but his eyes are red, and it's this really cool red where like it's just the whites, like he still has his pupils and everything, and it's almost like you can imagine it just being this glow that would just come there for a briefest of seconds and then leave. And I think it was a great way to signify, because he yells at people all the time in the books, and you don't know if he's using the word or not.
Yeah.
Except for when his eyes are red. So in the show, I feel like it's going to get a little corny if we just keep seeing these close-ups of Dominic Cooper's mouth. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I kind of just want the flash of something visual to also make the characters in the show kind of go like, whoa, what was that? Did you see that kind of thing? Because I always like that they have those moments like, what was that? Well, we'll get to what we think or questions we have, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I have a list of questions here that we can add on to last episode's questions. Obviously, number 1 is who is the mysterious man from 1881, which you know, but we as the general audience do not. Cassidy actually asks a question to Jesse. He says, "Who taught Jesse to fight? Who taught you to fight?" And so
he asks him. He says, "Did your dad?" And
he
says, no.
He says, "No, someone else." So that's something that we'll need to learn about. So what were the two men trying to do to Jesse? It seemed like some kind of extraction ritual, but what were they trying to do and why were they trying to do it? So I think that's something that's big. What's up with Quincan and Meat and Packing? They seem somewhat non sequitur so far in terms of like, I don't see how they fit in. Like, I feel like it's almost setting up to be some kind of conflict with Jesse and his crew, but I don't know how or why yet. I think you're kind of in the dark a little bit about it too, maybe because it's so early.
No. Yes and no. I think I know what function they'll serve.
Okay.
All right. It's not when I expect it.
All right. So, and then there might be a few more here as well. I think there were 1 or 2 that I thought of during the show that I forgot to write down. One of the other questions I had is when is Jesse going to learn about the strange men who tried to kill him? Like, when is Cassidy going to tell him about that? You think, but it makes sense because it seems Cassidy thinks that they were after him.
It's true.
So maybe he feels that like he needs to not tell Jesse, but it seems like something that you might want to tell. Like, they were clearly trying to chop him up. Like, it's, so
yeah.
I think that might be important too. But did you have anything else that you wanted to add to that?
I'm just, I'm really excited and curious to see how the ending of this episode is going to play out. Because we know that when Jesse commands someone to do something, it can be taken extremely literally.
Yeah.
And so I think that the potential for something horrifying to happen always exists. It's like when we were watching the pilot and he said that to that guy,
and
I started
you were
laughing.
immediately like, oh, this isn't going to go well.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, this will be real nasty. And so as soon as he said it, it's a very cool moment in the show, and it did absolutely, I didn't realize that was the end of the episode, and then the credits started rolling, and I was like, oh, that was good. But I'm really curious how it's going to play out if her eyes are going to snap open and she's going to be like a zombie still, or he has to figure out the nuances of what he can do.
Yeah.
So so far it's being done in a relatively humane way.
Yeah, but
against the source material. So we'll see.
We'll see what else.
It'll last.
All right.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think that's good. At first, I was a little bit put off by the end of the first episode by kind of being like, this has deviated heavily already. But I'm kind of more open to where I think it's going now.
That's
but I
good.
have some conditions.
Yeah.
So we'll see
We'll see if they meet the
we'll
conditions.
see in 8 weeks if the conditions have been met. But so far, so good. I'm impressed, to say the least. And I never want anything negative I say should be understood that this is remarkable that we're even talking about a Preacher show, and that it is as good as it is, and that it's on cable.
I remember hearing about this being developed like
numerous
it's been
times.
like 6 years ago. Like
I think
they've been working on it since like the early 2000s, I think. All right, I want one thing I want you to do. Here's your homework for this week.
Me?
I want you, yes, Nick.
Okay.
I want you to go through a few different Steve Dillon comics and give me screenshots of Dillon Face. Because I'm going to make a link. It's not available yet, so don't go there yet. But I'm going to make a link, g2tpodcast.com/DillonFace, so people can go and see what we're talking about.
Oh, that'd be great.
I think that would, just to kind of illustrate and show people what we mean.
Okay.
So I think that would be good. Check out some Punisher comics, do some Preacher.
Oh yeah, I think we even talked about it in the previous episode that John Bernthal is basically a walking Dillon Face.
Yeah. I'll put him in there too.
Oh yeah, no, so. I'll find a panel where it looks like John Bernthal, and I'll just say, here you go, like, because they're there.
All right.
Oh, it's so good, it's great. I'm trying to think of something to compare it to, and there's really nothing else quite like it because it's not bad. That's the thing. It's like it's kind of stupid.
Yeah,
and you kind of laugh.
Like
and you're
I was gonna bring up 90s comics guy, Big
Rob
Barrel
Liefeld.
Rob Liefeld is who I was going to bring up. But
that's totally fair because that's bad.
yeah.
No, it is interesting because good artists, it's not just about the actual like raw aesthetic, but it's about how they can use space and three dimensionality and how they can draw action. Somebody once called out Steve Dillon on, I think it was on Reddit actually. They're like, "Oh, Steve Dillon sucks." Somebody posted there's a really famous panel from a Punisher account from Welcome Back Frank where he gets thrown into an enclosure in the zoo and he punches out a polar bear. And it's really awesome. And he just slugs it. And anyway, I think it was one of those panels, and somebody was pointing out like, "Oh, I love this panel," and everyone's like, "Yeah, it's so great. Welcome Back Frank is so fun." And somebody's like, "Oh, Steve Dillon sucks," and everybody like piled on him like, "Why? Because of Dillon Face?" Like. That we love Dillon Face, first of all, but B, he's a great artist because there's certain things where if you have a brand that's strong where you can just look at something and go, "Oh, Steve Dillon drew that," for better or for worse. It's kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Rob Liefeld is like now notorious for, he actually did a lot of good things for comics, but he's kind of bad. Yeah. So it's kind of funny that's turned into like a joke.
Yep.
There's a novelty Rob Liefeld Twitter account that I follow, and it's so good. It's hilarious. It's really good.
But it's the same way that you can call a Tim Burton movie when you're looking at a frame.
Sure. Yeah. And some people don't like it. They'll be like, "Oh, I hate that Tim Burton."
Exactly.
Or even like, I mean, this is a little extreme, and it always elicits a groan from somebody in the room, but it's just you and me, so I'll know who it is. But like Michael Bay, even like there's a trademark, there's a hallmark look to Michael Bay, and see, I knew it, it's you. But there's certain things where you just like you'll see a frame and you're like, "Who directed this?" And you'll know. You're like, okay, what is it? There's a sunset in the background.
Yeah, when you're watching a fight scene and there's 35 million cuts, it's Michael Bay.
No, I think there's directors that are way more guilty of cutting than him, but he just has a look and he has a feel. Mm-hmm. And there are certain things, like once I started working more and studying film a little bit more, I would watch some scenes from a lot of, whoever. But I watched a scene from Bad Boys and I was like, now that I was a little bit more in the know of what makes something different or stand out, I was just noticing the way this scene was like blocked and staged and the way it was lit and everything. And I was like, whoa, there's a lot of design and skill that went into this throwaway scene of just two guys talking.
Yep.
And that's really cool. And again, it kind of goes back to the same thing about great comic art. If you don't notice it necessarily as someone who's just casually reading or something, that means they're doing their job.
Yeah.
I suppose, in a way.
Yeah. It just depends.
So basically the whole point is Steve Dillon Face is really funny. It is a real thing, but he is actually a really good artist. Like there's part of the reason the Preacher is so good is because of Steve Dillon.
So follow us on Facebook or Twitter. I will tweet out when g2tpodcast.com/DillonFace is available if you want to see it. Because I think it will be a good utility to illustrate what we're talking about.
Yeah, nobody on the show so far has Dillon Face.
Yeah,
so
not
sorry,
quite.
Unfortunately, John Bernthal is not involved in the show.
Nope.
Yet.
All right. So once again, you can find more of our episodes of our podcast on g2tpodcast.com. That's the letter G, the number 2, the letter T, podcast.com. We're also on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play Music. You can subscribe and rate and review us there. Please do that. That'll bring us up in the rankings. We'll get more listeners, and then we can spend more time making the show even better than it already is. We're also G2T Podcast on Twitter, and you can email us at g2tpodcast@gmail.com. to tell us what you think of our show and share your thoughts about AMC's Preacher so we can read them on air. That's corrections, observations, or anything regarding Preacher or our podcast. If you want to hear Nick and I talk about a film, not a film, sometimes a film, but talk about film
Generally
with a few, with a few other friends, be sure to check out the Midwest Film Nerds podcast at midwestfilmnerds.com. And then we at the Midwest Podcast Network also have a video game podcast called the Midwest Game Nerds Podcast. Check that out at midwestgamenerds.com. And finally, our theme music is the song All In by a band called The Red Thread, and we're using it under a non-commercial Creative Commons license. So you can check out a link to more of their stuff on g2tpodcast.com in any of the posts on our episodes. So next week, episode 3, I think it's called The Possibilities. And supposedly I heard that it might be airing at 8 o'clock. So they're really screwing with the time slot on the show. They did 10 for the first pilot airing, and then I think they did 9 for the second pilot airing, and now they did 9 for this episode, and they're going to do 8 for the next one. I don't know if that's true. I just saw it real quickly on Reddit, so check your local listings if you want to catch Preacher, but keep an eye out for that. Hopefully you all are DVRing it anyway, so it doesn't matter. But we'll be back next week with another episode of Gone to Texas, and for now, Kyle XY, go watch Preacher.